Well, the polo shirts are out, so that must mean it must be springtime. I haven't seen the leaves start to come out in the trees, but boy, I mean, I've already got wearing my straw hat, and my polo shirts. So it is springtime. So okay, now give me a moment, and let me just go ahead and had to do some business at Ohio State. So give me a moment, and we'll.
Please insert your ticket with your barcode facing up.
Well, now you know where I am. See, proof positive. You see,
Please insert your ticket with your barcode facing up.
There you go. Okay, so it doesn't look like Rio de Janeiro. So that now that we've established that this is from the campus of Ohio State, it's now time for an episode of Brother Mark, Turner Syndrome, Butterflies in Life. One thing, by the way, if you've never been to Ohio State, there's an unwritten rule that the second somebody steps off the street, they have right away. They shouldn't, but they do. Now, I'm wondering if that person's going to wave. Oh, he did. Wow, that was absolutely miraculous. Anyway, today I want to talk about power of attorney, and then I also want to talk about my own experiences with toxic parenting. And it, again, is another one of those elephants in the room in the Turner Syndrome community. But I think it's time to open up the Pandora's box on it. By the way, if you remember the legend of Pandora, Pandora's curiosity got the best of all this evil spirit came out. But there was also an angel of hope just for such contingencies. So I think the angel of hope, will be joining me today. maybe metaphorically speaking. So anyway, so I wanted to. Why do we have power of attorney? Well, obviously, given the fast changes that the condition can make, I mean, obviously, there are some butterflies that, quite honestly, need, in times of crisis, need medical help, and that in itself is it's needed, it's necessary, it's desirable. Now, I and another person will be, I think probably we're figuring out how to do it, but I'm gonna have an expert, legal expert on what power of attorney is and what it isn't. And we'll have to wait a minute for all the pedestrians to get across. Good, he went straight. So, all right. But I mean, sometimes we need, and that is needed in case. I mean, I'm sure there are situations where the condition can take an abrupt turn, and the parents have to kind of take over. And medical power of attorney, it's a necessity, it's a desirability, but, and this is where I have to take really harsh exception. It can be used, and I never thought about, but it can be used as a cult mind control dynamic to try to shut people up. And power of attorney does not remove one's ability to express their thoughts, their opinions, or whether you like a situation. From a standpoint of jurisprudence, that went out with the 14th Amendment. And if those who don't have the time to Google it, that it was the Emancipation Proclamation in 1864 that outlawed slavery. And as a former cult member, if anybody's using power of attorney to restrict somebody's ability to speak their hearts, their minds, without threats or without coercions, then I've got a real problem. Now, I can't, I can only offer my comments on it because, again, I'm not in the legal profession. I have no level of expertise. I'm not qualified. From an academic standpoint, just from a moment of curiosity, it does kind of make me wonder, would that someday have the makings of a Supreme Court case? And the only thing my only response to that is, could be, but then that and $4.44 will get me a venti non-fat 1 sugar and a raw latte at Starbucks. So there you go. So that's all I can say. I've got an academic curiosity, but as I say, that's going to get me a latte at Starbucks, and that's about it. But power of attorney does not, when it's used as a mind control or it's used to restrict speech, or is allowed to abuse people, then again, I would have to raise a moral and ethical red flag and go, because we've had situations where people wanted to come forward and wanted to talk, but they were afraid that their power of attorney would restrict their speech. So, but again, we'll have more professional help that on a future video, and we're still trying to work out the dynamics on it. Toxic parenting. I think Amy Jo Talark would say, not all Turner syndrome butterflies have it, or need it, or suffer from it. And there are some who have come up in loving, caring, families. And then there's some that I've talked to some whose relationship with their parents have been like, it's been a veritable World War III. So, again, I've had those conversations. But the thing I kind of wonder about, though, the reason I can really relate to this topic, I got to thinking about it, and I thought about some people with disabilities who weren't, I think, had helicoptered parents, and they couldn't do anything because either the church that they were in, or the church or their parents wouldn't let them, even though they're full adults in their 20s and 30s. So, one book that I would just commend, and again, it's a book. It's called Toxic Parents by Susan Forward, just like the direction, Forward. And it's been out, so it's probably available for next to nothing on Kindle. I'm sure that any public library is going to have it. You could probably find it for next to nothing in the used bookstore too, if you play your cards right, so you don't have to make too hefty an investment, because the book's been out since it came out in the late 80s, if my memory serves me right, because I first got it when it came out in hardback. So as soon as it came out, I think I must have run down to the nearest bookstore and bought it when it first came out. But Susan Forward talked about the dynamics of toxic parenting and controlling parents, and parents that won't let their children realize their full potential. There's some whole variety of case studies and some horror stories in there. In the end, though, and I haven't read the book in decades, but I do remember Forward, this is the author's name, mentioning some suggestions. One is you can live with your parents, but and then just accept the fact they're not going to be changed, and that's just the way it is. A second school of thought is yes, I can have the parents in my life, but they're going to have to accept my boundaries. And then the third one, which unfortunately in my case, was there comes a point where just so I can have my own personal autonomy and maybe some butterflies so they can have their own personal autonomy are going to have to just move out and make some real hard decisions about whether communicating with their mom and dad is the safe thing to do. And again, I'm going to throw the ball in the butterfly's court of what she and her family and maybe her spouse, if she's married, or her siblings or her friends think, or her recovery community or a professional counselor would say would be the best route to go. So I'm only going to just say that these are some of the thoughts. So yeah, I'm looking at some toxic parenting situations. Private boarding schools are just riddled with it. And then it's funny, as I was a student at a school just below the Ivy League, that I eventually transferred out because I got tired of the drama. So funny you mention him, but there was a lot of toxic parenting, and it really caused some very serious damage and some very serious responses. But now let me look at. I'm going to keep once again the fictitious name. But I dated a girl in college by the name of, we're going to call her Susan Dunbar. And sweetest girl, her parents were just as sweet as could be, and she had a whole great group of friends in Leland College. No relationship to family ties. But as we were actually, Susan and I were actually engaged. But one thing that really made the relationship absolutely stark, staring bonkers was that Susan couldn't do anything because her church and her parents wouldn't let her. I'm just not going to mention the name of the church. You can fill in the blanks and you can make it what you see. But obviously, the church's doctrines wouldn't allow her to do anything. And her parents, who were just hardcore members of that denomination, couldn't do anything. Of course, keep in mind that I was a New England Unitarian, so you can imagine how well that relationship went over. So, but I mean, finally, just enough was enough, and I couldn't do anything. One thing that I noticed about Susan, though, is that she did get into I managed to break free from parents, but then got into some abusive relationships. Although, much to her credit, she actually did get into 12-step recovery because I met up with her. The most fascinating story, though, was she did break free from her toxic parents, and I found her, and I knew that she would never, ever, ever move out of New England. It's never going to happen. And I look up her Facebook page, and she's living in, let us say, a rural town in Illinois. One that I happen to know because a company had its headquarters there. So it's like, wow. And apparently she's doing well. She's taking classes. She's trying to get a degree. And he's actually got a loving husband, a loving family, and they're known as being very charitable, and they will do anything for anybody in need. I mean, they're just beloved. They are just muchly beloved in a rural town in southern Illinois. So there you go. So it is possible. A little about my story. I'm not going to. In my parents were kind of leftovers from the Beat generation, and they did the best they could. I mean, they tried to get me good education and tried to get me in the right schools, and some were just a really horrid cult-like fit, but they tried. I mean, they did the best they could. But in later years, when I started getting to my 20s or 30s, there was still that you can't do anything right. If you do this, you're only going to mess it up. And it kept me from venturing out or taking risks or trying new careers, because the message they kept giving me is you're not going to amount to anything. You're going to mess up. Why bother? And they had a narrow-minded view that you had to go to college, you had to get a graduate degree, and quite frankly, I just wasn't cut out for it. And there are blue-collar occupations that I could have done and done well and loved it, and that to them was just anathema. So, but I couldn't. You can't do this because. And there was also a lot of real sick abuse, and I'm not going to get overly explicit. And when I confronted them, they were just in total denial. I think it really got bad when my Uncle Ross committed suicide, and then after that point, there was a major schism in our family. Thankfully, to this day, I'm very thankful for the relatives who just, without even asking, just stepped in and filled in the gap. There was a Quaker uncle, there were some relatives, there was a favorite cousin of mine, and a couple of aunts that just really loved and adored, and somehow they took over. But I know for me, when I looked at Susan Forward's book, it just came to the point, if I were to grow up and to be all that I could be, first off, I was in a religious cult, so I had to make a break from that. But I also had to make a break from my parents, because even when I moved out to Ohio back in 1985, they said, you're going to mess it up, you're going to come back, all these terrible things are going to happen. And finally, just like when a cult member realizes just how corrupt this group is, or a person in an abusive group realizes how abusive, there's a process called snapping, where the light comes on and says, no, I can't do this. And there just comes a point when one's in an abusive relationship that one just has to stop banging their head against the wall and say, that's it, I'm done. I'm out of here. I can't take it anymore. I had to. It was hard work, but I'll tell you that it was really rewarding work. And I was butting heads with my folks, and then said, hey. They believed that the sky was green with pink polka dots, and there's nothing I could do, to change it. But for me to grow up and to be all that I could be, I had to move out of state. That's what I had to do. Now, each person's story is different, but one rule: all of us, butterflies or friends, have every right to be treated with dignity and respect. Even with disabilities, we're supposed to have our own freedom, our own freedom, and our own autonomy, we should allow ourselves to let ourselves be the men and women, that God chose us to be. And God doesn't want to be in bondage to anybody, and that includes parents that aren't letting you grow up. And it's hard. It's hard to polish those wings sometimes. It's hard sometimes to get past the anxiety sometimes. But sometimes we have to poke our head up. There's a really wonderful story. One of my favorite butterflies. It was great. And I know she's got a load on her plate, like a lot of butterflies, and even the supportive brother. But the thing about it, the thing about it is there was one time that I got that butterfly to laugh, and I would love to see that butterfly laugh again. I'd love to see her, be able to joke around. But there was one day, like many butterflies, there was the day just, fraught with anxiety, and she just couldn't snap out of it for anything. And we were getting ready to leave church, and I said, I turned to her and said, do you suppose that maybe the official animal of the Turner Syndrome Society should be the turtle? She thought about it, and she just burst out and laughed. I've never seen that sister laugh so hard. And whoops. Of course, it helps if I release my brakes. But it took her a few minutes to catch her breath, and finally, she realized. She just looked at me and said, "Okay, you got me." Sometimes the brave butterflies, though, the ones who are going to be willing to stick their neck out, and the ones who are willing to say, no, enough's enough. No, I'm not being treated like that anymore. And sometimes there are times in our lives where we've blown it. And I think this butterfly knows about my cult experiences, times that the parents know about the serious damage that I did. And when I started to come clean in recovery communities, in safe places, not all over media, but they remember my story. And the amazing thing is that just because I made a mistake doesn't mean I am one. I have an acronym for the word shame, which is sad, hopeless, agonizing, melancholy, and empty. But I think what our faith tradition teaches us to do, and what recovery teaches us to do, is we have the ability through a higher power in our faith tradition to come clean. We also learn how to be treated with dignity and respect. And if we're not being treated with dignity and respect, then maybe it's time to go. And there are those famous 5 words that I probably encourage this butterfly to use. when next time that somebody tries to control that butterfly, that is not good enough. No, I'm not going to be treated that way. And I know there are times in my life I had to stop banging my head with my folks, and I had to make a clean break. It was the right thing for me to do. Now, each person's story is different, but certainly all of us deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And by the way, I've done some horrible things in my life, but when I got the chance to tell my story and the wrongs in recovery, ICSA, International College Studies Association, the place to go. Wellspring in Athens, the place can't afford. Celebrate Recovery is a great place to go as well. And just to talk with women who've been there, seen it, done that, and got the T-shirt. You're only as sick as your secrets. And I'll tell you, when I finally stopped running and came clean, I mean, it was such a weight off my shoulder. That's a long process of recovery. Lifestyle of holiness, as we would say in our church tradition, it's a process, not an event. But that butterfly knows I'm there for her, day or night, and she knows that if that butterfly knows she's blown it, she knows she can come to me anytime, day or night, and I'm there. No judgments, no criticism, no, you're never going to hear, how could you do such a stupid thing? No, because I've done stupid things myself. You're in a safe place. So once again, if you don't feel safe, I don't feel safe. And for any other butterflies that have had problems with the bullying or the abuse, if you see something, say something. Well, now that's my homily. It's free. You didn't see a toll-free number flash up on your YouTube video, did you? Now watch one of the naysayers try to put one on there. Well, we'll deal with them appropriately. Well, as a good old street preacher in a soup kitchen in Cleveland said, if you mess up and you fess up, God will bless up. So do a quick training on how to unblock people in Facebook and see what happens. Okay, that's for a few people out there. So, anyway, as always, take what you like, leave the rest, and I'll talk to you next time.